So for the first time in a really long time, Houston Rockets were actually one of the worst teams in the NBA. This is due to the fact that for the last 8 years, they were led by James Harden, who constantly led them to 50-win seasons. Then after they traded him, they just were really bad and they tanked. But their tanking was really successful, as they ended up getting the number 2 overall pick in the NBA draft and selecting future NBA All-Star in Jalen Green. But even though it looks like Houston has a really bright future, there still is a chance that the Rockets mess up their future. And that's led me to make this video where I'll be discussing how I would fix the Houston Rockets to make sure they have a bright and successful future. Before we get into the video, I ask you to drop a like on this video as it does help my channel grow. Subscribe to my channel if you want daily NBA content. I literally post every single day. Also, if you want to help me reach my goal of 1,500 subscribers, also drop a comment on this video as I do respond to all of my comments, and play that intro. The first step I would take towards making sure the Houston Rockets have a bright future is playing their young guys a lot. And when I say young guys, I don't mean guys like Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green, because those guys are obviously going to get a lot of playing time. They're probably going to be starting and getting a lot, and I mean a lot of minutes. But there are other guys who are part of this Houston Rockets team that have a lot of potential, but they're not as popular as Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green. And I'm talking about like they're low-key young players, because Houston actually has a lot of them. And the reason this is like a point is due to the fact that Houston is a team with a couple of veterans, as they do have John Wall, Eric Gordon, Daniel Theis, Danuel House, David Nwaba, and DJ Augustine. Those are all guys who on a good team could be solid role players, and I fear that the Houston Rockets coach might favor to play them over the other young players because he's trying to win games and stuff. But I honestly think that would just be really dumb, and they should be playing their young guys. I'm talking about guys like Alperen Sengun, who really showed out during the summer league. He's a big man who a lot of people think is the steal of the draft, and I honestly think he does have star potential. And obviously he shouldn't be playing over Christian Wood, because Christian Wood's a phenomenal player and an all-star level player, but he should be playing at the backup center instead of Daniel Theis, and he should be playing at least 15 to 20 minutes. They also should play Josh Christopher, who's a guy who I think has great 6-man potential and maybe even a bit of star potential, as he's a guy who can create his own shot and he's crazy athletic. They should also give Usman Garuba some playing time, because he's one of the best defenders in the draft, but he's really, and I mean really a raw prospect, especially on the offensive side of the floor. He's going to need some play time to develop. Also, Kenyon Martin Jr. has to get some play time, because I think he could be a really good role player in the future. So I wasn't lying when I said Houston has a lot of low-key and underrated young players. I just hope none of them get put on the bench like the whole season, and I'd like to see them all play over 15 minutes per game, and I think that would help you in the future, because it would be developing your young players more, and they would just play more and show how good they actually can be. And that's obviously way more important than playing Daniel Theis for 25 minutes. The second step I would take to make sure the Houston Rockets have a bright future is trying to trade or buy out John Wall. And this isn't because John Wall is a terrible player. He's definitely not in his prime, but I would still say he's an above average point guard in the league, and a lot of teams could use him, because I don't think it's too crazy he could become an all-star player again. But the problem is he doesn't fit the timeline of this team at all. Also, he's a point guard and he probably has a big ego, and right now I think it makes more sense for him to come off the bench, because Kevin Porter Jr. is going to play the point and Jalen Green is going to play the shooting guard position. But I could see him having a problem with that, because he is a guy who just came off of averaging 20 points and he's a multiple time all-star in his career. So I doubt he's just going to willingly go to the bench for like some young players. So I think it would be good to try and trade him, or maybe even buy him out, possibly before the season starts. And I think it would actually be really hard to get rid of him, because he has a huge contract. He's making like over $45 million a year. But if they could get him off this roster, I think it would drastically help their future, because it would just not mess up their chemistry. And also getting rid of Wall is freeing up minutes for the other young players that you want to play, because you're not just going to play John Wall, you have to play the other players as well. And I think they might have to do something similar to the Andre Drummond in the Cleveland Cavaliers situation, where they just sit him out, try and look for a trade for him, because I don't think he fits on this team right now at all. The third step I would take to ensure the Houston Rockets have a bright future is to not make them a horrible team right now. like tell their coach to do that. And don't get twisted. I'm not saying they need to go out there and try and make the play-in tournament, make the playoffs, anything like that. Because even if they tried their absolute hardest, they probably aren't gonna make the play-in tournament. They're probably not gonna be that good. But what I'm saying is they shouldn't try and tank for a high pick like they were doing this past season. Because I think they should actually try and go out there and compete in games and win. If they didn't have like a star player like Jalen Green, like a guy who I know for sure is gonna be a star, then I probably would say they should tank and try and get that type of player, because you're not going to get that type of player in free agency. But now that they have that type of player, I think they should actually try and win, because the thing is that when an NBA team has a lot of losing seasons, a lot of the players on that team pick up losing habits, meaning whenever the team is actually ready to start winning games and compete, the players have a lot of losing habits, and it makes them not as good as they should be. So I think the Rockets from now on should have the mindset to try and win games, but not at the expense of them playing veterans too much. Of course, we don't mess with veterans. The fourth and final step I would take to make sure the Houston Rockets have a bright future is trying to trade their veterans. I don't really like them because this is a team filled with veterans. And I know every team needs veterans, because if you have a team that's filled with young players, there's going to be no type of leadership. This team actually has a lot of guys who I think could be really good role players on a team that's actually trying to win. And that's a good and bad thing, because those guys could teach the younger players, but at the same time, those veterans are actually going to be trying to play, because if they just stay on the bench the whole time, they could possibly get kicked out the league and stuff. Guys like Eric Gordon should definitely be trying to get off this team. He's a guy who can do some great things for contending teams. He was in a lot of trade rumors at the draft, but nothing really fell through. I don't think trading him would be that hard, because he's a guy who can space the floor. I should also look to trade Daniel Theis. I don't even know why they would sign him. Like, they gave him like a decent amount of money just for him to be the backup center when they already have a pretty promising one in Alperen Sengun. They should just give Alperen Sengun all his minutes. I don't know why they signed him, unless they're gonna trade him. But signing Theis is just taking minutes away from their young players for no reason, and the Rockets aren't even going to be a good team, so it makes no sense. But I think Theis is a really good backup center, and I think a lot of teams would be interested in trading for him. They should also try and trade Danuel House, because he's a solid D and 3 player, 3 and D player, and a few teams could use him. They should also try and trade DJ Augustin, because he could be a decent backup point guard on some teams. Also, David Nawab is a solid defender. So basically, this is a team filled with a bunch of old veteran players, and I could see them getting maybe protected first round picks and second round picks in return for those players. I think getting all those assets would help them in the long run if they want to make any trades, or if they just want to get a steal in draft or anything like that. But I definitely think having all these veterans on this team is a good and bad thing. It's a good thing because they could trade them, and it's a bad thing since they probably are going to be taking minutes away from the younger players. I don't actually think these veterans are bad players, but I just think they should play their young players more. But to conclude the video, Houston definitely has one of the best and most bright futures in the NBA right now. They also are one of the biggest winners of the offseason. They did exceptionally well in the NBA draft. I don't really have too much doubts about their future. I just want to give some things that I would like do to its fullest. Houston also has one of the best futures as long as Jalen Green is good, and he's as good as he's projected to be. I doubt they're going to be a bad team for a while. Anyways, guys, that's it for the video. Let me know whether or not you agree or disagree with what I said. Drop a like on this video, as it does help my channel grow. Subscribe to my channel if you want daily NBA content, and if you want to help me reach my goal of 1,500 subscribers. Also drop a comment on this video, as I do respond to all of my comments, and I'm out.